Welcome to our latest edition of the High in Fiber podcast with my very special guest today, Sarah Dela Cruz. Sarah!
Hi!
Thanks for coming out. I don't know, sitting in your apartment. And also we might also have visits from her cat, Sparta, who has been lovely so far.
Oh, yes. He's quite the exhibitionist, so I will do my best to censor him.
If need be, I can throw up like some little censor blocks or pixelations of things, you know. We can work with it.
Yeah, totally.
So Sarah, for everybody, she is, we've become fast friends since quarantine kind of hit back in March. We started by hanging out. I'd seen her at Wet Coast Wolves a number of times, but here comes Sparta. So Sarah and I started hanging out with like virtual knit groups and stuff, and I basically become pretty fast friends. And I remember when we exchanged our first couple text messages, they were just gifts, and I was like, aha, this person and I are going to be fast friends. So thanks for coming, Sarah and Sparta.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. And I'll just, because he probably just wants to be close up.
Hi, Sparta. Oh, look at his pretty face.
All right. Down you go. Whoa!
Cat down.
He's okay. He's fine.
I'll put a disclaimer at the end. No animals were harmed in the making of this podcast.
He didn't fall. He latched on. He just like latched onto the blanket and climbed up. We're good.
So since I've known Sarah, or actually first I'll let Sarah do a little introduction. So Sarah, where can we find you if people want to get to know you or see your knitting and whatnot?
Yeah, so I'm Sarah Jean DC on all the things. I really only use Instagram and Ravelry, so that's pretty much where you'll find me.
Those are good places to be found. I can support that. So since I've known Sarah is like a chronic test knitter, I guess you would say. So we met in March, and I guesstimated that she has done about 12 test knits since March, I was apparently pretty close.
Yeah, I double checked because I was like, is that right? Maybe not. Yes, I have done 11 so far this year, and I currently have one on the needles. So depending on if I finish it before the year ends, it's not due until January, so I might not. I probably won't.
I just don't, you're just like insane, because it's like every time life gets like busy, you're like, don't let me sign up for another test knit, and then it's like literally within 24 hours you're like, so I decided to knit this sweater, and it's like a full sweater and it's only fingering weight.
Yeah. So it's I really enjoy it. I like the deadlines. It motivates me to get something done, and sometimes you just want a finished object.
Yeah, it's true. How did you get into, so before we get too much into test knitting and stuff, did you learn like the traditional way to knit? Was it from your grandma or?
Yes and no. So I actually started out as a crocheter. Mm-hmm. So my grandma, every week in the summer when I was a kid, I would spend a week in the summer with my grandma. And she would teach me different home ec things because she was a home ec teacher. So I would learn how to sew, I would learn how to crochet, and I would spend the whole week perfecting that. And the next year, because I didn't practice anything when I went home for the rest of the year, I would come back and I'd have to relearn, but I got the basics of crocheting from her. She was a beautiful knitter, but hated knitting. So she didn't really bother to teach me knitting. So that's kind of how it started. And then when I was in high school, I picked it up again of my own volition and started crocheting. And then when I was it 2014, I got really serious about crocheting. And then did a lot of crocheting and trying new patterns. And then I started getting into real wool. Like I found out that there was a place aside from Michael's that you can buy yarn. And so I started getting into real wool and indie dyed wool. And in 2018, I was like, I really want to make socks, but crocheting socks sucks. For those of you who can do it, good for you. But I definitely can't. So I was like, I'm going to learn how to knit because I want to knit socks. And so in 2018, I started knitting, and it's 2020 now, and I'm knitting a lot. So
that's unreal that you've only like been knitting. I know that often crochet and knitting go hand in hand, but I personally am a terrible crocheter. Like my attention is always complete garbage, and I can't imagine, like I've seen your knitting and you knit very elaborate, complicated things and whatnot, and you've jumped both feet in. Totally.
I watched a ton of YouTube. You know, I was really nervous about knitting, and so I knew that I could go to yarn stores and get lessons, but I was always afraid of being judged because I'm at it. And I liked that watching on YouTube, I could pause it and rewind it, and the person teaching me to knit was never going to be like, really, you need to see that again? So I just watched a ton of YouTube and different things, different channels. There's some really good ones out there. There's ones that I thought would be really good, but turns out for like a certain thing, I might have needed a different person, a different perspective, seeing how to do that. So yeah,
that's
YouTube taught.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many good resources out there on YouTube now. I know whenever I teach beginner classes and whatnot, and even sometimes for myself, if there's something that comes up that I haven't done in a long time, I know I really like Very Pink Knits. I don't know if you have any favorite ones that you go to.
Yeah, Very Pink Knits was a big one. That was I watched a lot of Very Pink Knits, and there's Knit Pearl Hunter, I think is.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a few. There's also the New Stitch a Day was pretty good. It just kind of depended on what I needed, and if the first video I watched made sense. Sometimes I'd have to go through a couple videos before I found one that I liked. I don't like ones that have a ton of preamble, so.
Like, I got this casting on thing. I don't need 10 minutes of casting on.
Like, show me in the middle of the project.
Yeah. That's why I really like the Very Pink Knits ones, because she doesn't spend a lot of time just, there's so many videos where you go and you're just staring at someone's hands for 10 minutes before they get to what you actually like are supposed to learn in that video. So that's why I really like hers, because she's a little bit more to the point.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're in a project, maybe not a lot of designers, but there's quite a few designers now that have their own videos for things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've done a few tests for Jacqueline Cieslak, and she has like really, really good step-by-step tutorials included in her patterns. So I'd never done brioche before, and I test knit one of her brioche patterns, and step by step, she taught me everything I know about brioche so far.
That's amazing. I should look at that video because I am not good at brioche. Sarah and I have a mutual friend, Wendy. Hi, Wendy, who thinks knitting brioche is very kind of, I think, did she use the word zen? Meditative, that was the word.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, there's nothing about any of my experience with brioche that I could ever close to describe as meditative. Usually it's bleep, 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 bleep.
If it's just plain brioche, I'm okay. But yeah, if I'm doing like any kind of patterning in my brioche, which let's be honest, I've only done once and I had to pay a lot of attention. But I mean, it's okay.
I don't find the actual construction of brioche particularly complicated. It's I mess things up all the time and I can't fix it comfortably at all. Or if I fix it, it never looks right. And I think that's where my frustration with it comes in more than the actual mechanics of doing it. It's the fixing it. Because I'm one of those people that's always going, oh yeah, I dropped that stitch. Well, that's okay. I can fix it when I get back to it. Or, oh, I twisted something weird, or, or I only caught one strand of whatever I'm doing.
Well, and the thing is that like when I first learned how to knit, my very first knit was the Grocery Girls, or the Girl in the Grocery Store shawl by Kohi Locatelli. And I got to the very end. I managed to get through the whole thing. And then there's like lace work at the very end. And I messed up on one of the lace row panels, but I didn't know how to frog back. So I had to I had to go in and unpick each and every stitch for like 2 rows. And it's a lot of stitches at the end of that because I didn't know that, right? I didn't know that you can go, well, I mean, not right now, but normally you can go into your local yarn store and ask for help. And they could probably help you with that. But yeah, I had no idea and I was too afraid. I didn't want to lose all of my progress from, the whole shawl.
Yeah, for sure. I know when I've done complicated lace, lifelines are my best friend.
Yes.
So maybe I'll have to do a podcast on putting in lifelines because I get a lot of people that ask me about that. If you guys would want a video on how to do lifelines or put them in after the fact, let me know.
I would like one.
Yay! 1 viewer. Fantastic. So why don't we get into, well, actually, we both have our Advent knitting in our laps.
Yes, we do.
So Sarah and I, early on into our relationship,
the very beginning of our gifts.
Yeah, exactly. We both got this is the past self being great to current self. We both got the Sweet Fiber, who is a local dyer, Advent calendar.
Yeah. Kelsey and I may have enabled each other in this because I told her, I was like, look, a Sweet Fiber Advent calendar.
Yeah.
Like, didn't respond right away. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe she thinks it's like.
And I was like, I bought one.
And then she replies to me, I just bought it. Oh, well, now that you have it, I have to get it too.
Exactly.
So
we decided to knit a dress together.
Super fun.
So fun. So we're double scanning our Advent calendars, but because it was a fingering weight Advent calendar, but there's enough yardage to make a dress.
Yeah. In fact, there might be extra. I'm saving a little bit, but I'm also like more than half a foot shorter than Kelsey.
I'm tall. Sarah's on the shorter side. But they're so good. They're so great. I'm loving it so much. So I tried mine. I'll throw a picture in of me and I tried it on last night. So that was after what's today? The 15th, 14th? Today's the 15th. So I tried it on the 14th after I'd finished the 14th color. So I think I might have enough because I'm knitting the full amount of my minis. And I think I might have enough to do some afterthought pockets and maybe a belt or something. I'll see. Ooh. I do like having a long knitted dress. My other dress that I knit, it goes down halfway between my knees and ankles. So we'll see. But that also gets heavy. So
that's the thing.
But it would be so scoochy. So scoochy.
I can't wait. I'm just excited. I'm hoping to have it. If I actually get each color done on the day it's supposed to be done, I will be done by Christmas Day. And I won't be blocked, but I'm going to be at home, so whatever.
Who cares, right?
So I'm hoping
we'll both have new Christmas dresses.
Yeah.
I've so far been able to, there's been a couple days where I've had to finish the previous day's color, but I have, like today, I'm starting today's color today when we're filming. So, which is the 15th, by the way, in case anyone cares.
I taught myself how to flick instead of throw, and that's made me a lot faster. I literally, while doing this project, I taught myself to do that.
It's funny how particular projects will teach you a new skill just out of either sheer boredom or sheer frustration at how slow things are going.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It was going way too slow. I was like, I can't do this.
I taught myself how to do two-handed color work when I did something that had corrugated two-colored ribbing. So I was thinking, I did 2 rows where you like switched with everything, and I was thinking, this is no, don't do it. So I figured out how to do it, and I was like, oh, now I will never switch. It's magical.
My face is blowing out. My goodness.
Oh no, it's just because you're a glowing personality. It's your natural glow.
Sitting in front of a window.
I have a window coming in from this side, but then I have a selfie ring light that my coworker convinced me I should get over here, which is kind of great. It's like, woo! Just in case anybody cares.
Wear it as a halo.
Oh yeah, I could.
Behind you, like a halo.
Next time, I'll try that the next one, or I could just wear it on my head.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of funny, actually. You could use it as a halo for like a Halloween costume or something.
Totally.
Ideas. So since people are probably going, so where's the test knitting part of this conversation? So we're going to get into test knitting now. So Sarah, as we mentioned earlier, is a bit of a test knitting addict. She always has at least one on the needles, it seems. How did you decide that test knitting was something you wanted to get into?
Well, how did that really start? I actually did a test crochet first.
Okay.
Mostly out of 1, curiosity, and 2, I kind of wanted to challenge myself. Like, can I do something under a deadline? Am I going to learn anything? Plus, I was kind of interested in designing, and I wanted to know more about that aspect of it. And testing for people gives you a bit of insight as to things that you need to be aware of, and that kind of thing, right? It also, for a while there, it was a good way for me to kind of manage my finances.
For sure.
A lot of testing allows you to get at least that pattern for free, as long as you finish the test. And, yeah, so that was another thing that's kind of kept me doing it, but yeah.
And how do you decide whether or not you want to sign up for a test knit? Is it the particular project? Is it the designer? Is it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I tend to stick with designers that I already know. Sometimes I'll see something on like my Instagram feed that is a designer that I follow, and even if I've never knit anything of theirs, I might be like, well, I really like that pattern. If it's a certain thing that I know I'm going to wear, that's another thing. I don't really like to test knit things that I myself am not going to be able to wear. So, because I'm selfish. I am a selfish knitter. There are a few tests that I've done that were not for myself. This is one of them, right here and here, but still.
And so what would you say, I mean, I'm kind of the same too, is I tend to test knit for people that I either already know, or if it's something that I think that I will use. I like doing socks a lot for test knits, just because sometimes, not always, you can get away with just doing one. So it's a little bit more of a manageable commitment, whereas, a whole sweater can sometimes be a bit daunting, especially if the test deadline is really quick. And I think too, just in general, that sometimes it's just fun to dive into a new designer. I know for socks, at least, for me, that's a good way to get acquainted with the new designers, if they have a sock test.
Yeah. Because
socks are something I can always use, and even if I don't necessarily love what comes out of it, I can definitely still use it. Or socks are something that I often gift to like my husband, or I have a couple girlfriends that like it when I give them socks as well.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Socks are one of my favorite things to test knit. I've only tested a few pairs of socks, but they're definitely one of my favorites. I also love testing sweaters, because they're just pullovers especially, but sometimes cardigans. It depends on the cardigan.
You're even wearing one of them right now, right? You're wearing your cat bells?
This is my cat bells. I wanted to test this so badly, and I was test knitting 3 things at the same time.
Didn't you sign up for a test knit that you thought was the cat bells originally from
I
Megan, and then you're like, oh, it's not the cat bells.
Well, no, she told me that it wasn't the cat bells when I signed up.
Oh, okay.
For it. And she's like, if you don't want to, that's really cool. But you know what's funny is that I wanted to test knit the cat bells more than I wanted to test knit the other one. It's actually the Sabino Canyon, and it was a mystery, which I think we're going to get into.
Yeah.
But I actually wear that one all the time. I wear this one sometimes, and maybe it's just because it's super cold, but I wear that one all the time. I love it so much.
I'll throw in a photo of you if you're cool with it. I'll steal one off your Instagram or something of you in that one.
Yeah,
because it's such a cute one. So yes, as Sarah alluded to, sometimes you can actually, when you sign up for a test knit, you don't necessarily always know what you're signing up for. You might know the category, like it's a sweater, or it goes on your feet, or it goes around your neck, but you don't actually know what it looks like. And sometimes this is just a designer trying to keep their design a secret until it gets released, because let's be honest, there are people out there who look at designs and will rip them off and make them their own, or release like a free version of it if they can re-engineer it. So sometimes, especially the bigger name designers, will release something called a mystery test. So you sign up because you like the designer, or you know that, hey, it's socks, I like socks, or whatever, but you don't actually know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about doing, because you've done the one, have you done other mystery tests before?
I've done ones where I've not seen a finished object of it. There's usually a description, or you have an idea because it's based off of another one of that designer's designs.
Right.
But I've really only done the one where I had no idea what the finished object was going to look like.
Yeah.
And I think the big thing is that sometimes it's that the designer is doing, like I know Pip&Pin is doing a, or hers was a slow release. So it was like a mystery pattern. People were going to sign up and buy like a whole book. And that's why she did it that way. Sometimes the reason why it's a mystery is because the designer hasn't finished the object. So the mystery is because they've designed it, they've written it all out, but they haven't actually knit it yet.
Yeah, so they don't actually have a picture to give you to be like, this is what you are testing for me. It's like, here's the formula for it, but in my brain, this is what it looks like.
Yeah, the one that I'm currently testing, I haven't seen a finished object of this exact one, but the designer has other similarly designed patterns.
Yeah.
I have an idea, but I haven't seen what it looks like completed. So.
I think I've only done one mystery test knit, and there was, like you said, there was a fairly good written description. Like I knew it was going to be a racerback tank top, but that was about all I knew. And I knew, of course, what weight of yarn it was in and stuff.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to do a mystery test, you have to be confident that you like that designer's patterns. I knew with Megan's, I knew that I have all of her patterns in my library already. So I knew that I was going to love whatever it was.
Yeah,
so
totally.
There are a few other designers that I would probably do that for as well, but it really just depends.
Yeah. I find too, often you get used to like the vernacular that certain designers use. I know for me, I'm like José Pequin. I've test knit for her a few times, and I just find her patterns really easy to read, and I'm really comfortable with the language that she uses. And there's other designers as well, whereas sometimes I know when we have people who come into Wet Coast Wools, or if I get emails, people will send me a drops pattern or something, and I go, okay, have you knit a drops pattern before? How are you with reading, less than clear directions? Because those are always do this and do this, but then if you didn't keep reading, you should have also been doing this, 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 and this while you were doing all those other things. So just a cautionary tale out there for people doing drops patterns: read through and highlight things before you start knitting. So you don't learn it the hard way. Ooh, Sparta is pacing. So another thing I think that a lot of people, you are obviously a very experienced test knitter. I myself have done probably 20-ish test knits over the years. maybe a few more than that. I think there's often a misconception that you have to be a super experienced knitter with, you know, tens of 20 years of knitting experience. I mean, you've only been knitting for a couple of years, and you've done, in the last 9 months, 12. So do you have any advice that you would give to people who want to try test knitting but are intimidated by the idea that you should be this really fantastic, amazing knitter?
Well, I think the one thing is you need to see what the designer is asking for, right? A lot of designers are open to having beginner testers because they want to know that their pattern is something that someone new is going to be able to navigate through. It's tough if you sell a pattern and 100 people are emailing you asking, I don't understand, how do I do this? So that's one of the things. And the great thing about test knitting is that often there's a group chat or a group email or a group, some sort of way that you can communicate with the other people in the group. So if you don't understand something in the pattern, either the designer or somebody else that's knitting it is going to be able to help you. But again, it depends on what the designer is asking for, right? If they want only advanced testers because for a certain reason, maybe it's a deadline, who knows? But definitely look through what is going to be in the pattern, because a lot of the times they will give you some information on skills that you might need, right? If there's going to be in it and they want you to be experienced and you've never done brioche, probably not a good idea. But if they're like, hey, we want some beginners to try brioche, that's actually how I learned how to do brioche. And I just watched the videos as I went through and it was great. But you just need to read kind of what the requirements are and be comfortable with that, right? That you might have to frog back.
That happens a lot with test knitting, because you'll get partway, and especially I know for myself, because especially when I knit or do a test knit for a designer that I already know, and if I'm like comfortable with how they work, sometimes you miss like a really basic thing that if you're a newer knitter where you read every single word, you're not going, oh well, this is how it's constructed, I know that this is how it usually goes, so you just kind of keep going and you miss that little thing. You know, I think the biggest advice I would say is knit the pattern exactly how it says, because the point is you're trying to find any errors that the designer and tech editors have missed, or any kind of language that is not clear enough, so that way, you know, even someone who's brand new to reading patterns can go, oh, okay, I get that, you know.
That's a big thing, is I've knit a couple times where just kind of followed the instructions and didn't really think about what I was doing. And then, you know, I get quite a ways through it and somebody else goes, hey, shouldn't it actually be this way? And I'm like, oh, well, now I have to frog back to there and fix that.
Exactly. Oh, I missed that yarn over. That's supposed to be really prominent along the sleeve. Oops.
So, it happens. So you have to be okay with that, and you have to be comfortable meeting the timeline or the deadlines for it.
I'd say deadlines are one of the biggest obstacles, especially if you're committing to a sweater or something.
Yes.
So.
I've learned that, like, while I like having a deadline, it motivates me to get things done. I need to be realistic with what I can get done in a certain deadline. You know, I've seen tests that I really wanted to do because I really wanted that pattern, and because I love that designer. But sometimes it's like, yeah, I need this done in 4 weeks, and I know that I am not going to get a fingering weight sweater done in 4 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
I just know myself.
So if you are looking to do a test knit, maybe as a first one, consider doing something like a toque or socks or something that's a smaller project. So you can try it out first and see kind of what your experience is, and then how you like test knitting, because then you're not committing to a whole sweater. I too have done tests, like I did a fingering weight sweater test around this time last year, and it was not the biggest turnaround time, and I got all of the sweater done except for the sleeves.
I did a recent one myself that was, I had 3 months to get it done, and I finished it the day that it was that it was due. So yeah, I totally get that. Whereas there have been other sweaters that I finished it, you know, in in a third of the time that I was given. Right? It depends on how much you like knitting that kind of yarn and how much you like the pattern. So
for sure, for sure. So a couple of questions I have had a number of times when people ask about the fact that I've done and do test knitting, and often for, you know, relatively well-known designers as well. I have been asked a handful of times, actually more than a handful of times, if I get paid for test knitting. I know from my own experience that I have never been paid physical money for test knitting. You know, some designers will reimburse you for with a pattern or give you a coupon code to get another pattern of theirs for free. Sometimes, because both Sarah and I are large busted women, some designers, if you are test knitting a sweater per se, and they know that cost can be an issue if you're having to buy sweater or a sweater quantity of yarn, sometimes the whatever yarn that they designed in will give a coupon code, so you get a good discount if you're testing for them. But what is your experience with like payment versus non-payment for testing?
yeah, I think it depends. I mean, of course, the big thing is you need to finish it. If you don't finish it, I know there are some designers that I've tested for that even in the application say, if you don't finish this on time and meet all the requirements, that I will have to, that you're agreeing that you're going to pay for that pattern. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But most designers will compensate you with either a free pattern of theirs or a free pattern from someone else if you have all of theirs, like Megan of Pip&Pin. I have pretty much all of her patterns. But yeah, so that's the most common. Not all designers do that. Some of them don't do that. They will feed you on their feed, maybe. They might like give you a shout out, and that's kind of their way of doing it. And you have to keep in mind that it's sometimes just income wise, it may depend on where that designer is, right? A few where I didn't get anything except for the pattern that I tested itself, right? I've had a few where, yeah, I got discounts on yarn. I know there are a handful of designers that actually do pay their testers, but it really, they're few and far between. So it really depends.
I find too, usually if you're actually getting paid to do a test knit, more often than not, what's happening is they expect you, they will supply you with the yarn or payment, and whatever you knit for them goes back to them. Like you have to physically mail it or drop it off with them, and that goes into their realm of supplies, samples, and something that they use for photographing and advertising. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you see what that one is paid, you might want to ask
just confirm
questions.
yeah.
Just confirm, because especially if it's something that, you know, you're like, but I want to keep it, or, you know, make sure that you kind of, you know what you're signing up for.
That's more like sample knitting, so there is a bit of a difference between sample knitting and test knitting. Often sample knitting is you're making something for that person in their yarn or in their design and chosen yarn. So that can be different. There is also some designers do, I don't want to say it's called sample knitting, but they do sort of they send it out to people to knit it up so that different people can model it. They've already had it tested or check edited or whatever, but they want different people of different body sizes to actually knit the pattern and just give feedback or just show, like, it's not necessarily about checking the pattern for errors, it's about showing how it looks on different people. So that's another thing. I don't remember what that's called, but that's another thing that you might sometimes see. So
yeah,
it depends.
For sure. For people who might be interested in doing test knitting, since we've been yammering about it, there are some groups on Ravelry, like testing groups that you can find. Do you have a particular, like, what I know that Sarah, for you, you are on mailing lists of designers that you really like. How else do you find out about test knits?
Yeah, so it's different. Every designer has their own way of doing it. But the biggest one for me is I follow those designers. I have turned on post notifications for those designers if they're on Instagram, so that, because often they'll post something on Instagram in their stories or in their feed, and then you can just go it. Usually there's a link and you can sign up there. Some designers have a mailing list. Some of them have a specific testing mailing list. So you need to kind of keep an eye out for that. Some of them just post in their Ravelry groups. It really depends on the designer in question. Some designers already have a pool of people that they have do their testing, so they may not necessarily be looking for them. I know there are a couple that I was interested in, but they have their assigned testers, and one day I will get on that list.
Hey, you've been lucky. You've done for Andrea Mowry a couple times, right?
Yes, I've completed one of hers, and I'm doing another one.
Nice. Fancy.
Yeah, that was, I was like, oh my gosh. I've tested it for Jacqueline Cieslak a couple times.
You're wearing her rift, I think, aren't you?
I am wearing her rift, and Kelsey's yarn, by the way. This is the Mermaid's Tail colorway, and it is amazing.
Aw, thank you.
I get compliments on it all the time.
Yay!
So yeah, that's the most popular. The biggest one is usually they have a mailing list and they will send something out if they're about to be testing. So usually what I recommend doing. And don't be upset or like don't feel dejected if you apply and you don't get it. It took me quite a few times before I actually got a test knit that I applied for. And sometimes, you know, one of the best ways to get into test knitting is test knitting for more indie designers, because it can be hard to get into those other kinds of testing, right?
Because everybody and their dog wants to test knit for Andrea Mowry. So when a call goes out, if you're on their list, it's like they might only take 15 or 20 people, but if 500 people respond because they're all on the testing pool, it's
And that's the thing too, is you need to be really thorough with reading what the requirements are and what they want you to respond with. That's the other thing too. Some people don't read all of that. They just reply right away, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody. So make sure you read the requirements, make sure you can meet those requirements, and then apply.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'll put a link down below. I'll throw it up on the screen here too. There's in the last year and a half or so, there's a new, I think it's called like fattesttests, I think. I have to double check. It's on Instagram. There's about 6,000 people following it, but they're all for if you're larger busted like myself and Sarah. It's all like plus size or bigger boobage carriage.
Yeah.
So it's like all it's like the like, you know, 38-inch bust all the way up to like 65 or 68-inch bust. And that's been a really cool thing. I haven't done any test knits off of it. There's been a few that I've wanted to sign up for, but timing wise, I had other stuff going on at the time, so I didn't. But they post tests almost every single day. And it's a lot of indie designers and stuff too. And especially if you are larger busted, those are usually sizes that not as many people test knit for because more yarn, all of those things.
Yeah, and they're usually, not all of them, but a lot of them are a little bit more lenient with the larger sizes in terms of meeting the timeline. Usually they'll try to give you as much time as they can, but I know that in the past I've had designers who are like, you know, if you are knitting one of the larger sizes and you're not sure if you're going to be able to meet that timeline, let me know and we'll see. We might still be able to make it work. But obviously read what they're saying because if they are going to be lenient, they're going to tell you that. If they aren't going to be lenient and it's a strict deadline, they're going to tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. There's an article that I found too from Knittitude, the woman who designed our dresses that we're knitting. She has a really good test knitting 101 for both designers and for testers on her webpage. So I'll put a link down below for that because I found just really good information about like all the things to keep in mind as a designer when you're putting out a testing call. So if you are interested in designing and have always wondered how do I get test knitters, it'll give you some things to think about, and vice versa if you're wanting to get into test knitting. It's a really, really, really good thing. Yeah, I don't know, do we have more questions about test knitting or things to cover? I'm trying to think.
can't remember. Do we?
Did we? Oh, I know. You've signed up for a test knit. Now what? So things you should keep in mind. Take notes. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of notes. More notes.
Gauge swatch.
Yes, and gauge swatch. Oh my word. So much gauge swatch.
Speaking as somebody who hates gauge swatching, I will avoid it at almost any cost, but anytime I'm doing a test knit, I do gauge swatch, even if it's a very tiny gauge swatch.
Gauge is like the most important thing on the planet when it comes to testing, especially because if you're doing a design, let's say that's cables or lace or something like that, if your row and stitch gauge is like wildly off, whatever the designer's is, how that actual item is going to fit is going to be so different. So gauge swatch, super important. Make sure, I know Sarah and me sometimes maybe chintz a little bit and go a little bit on the smaller side, but do as we say, not as we do. I'm actually pretty good lately with swatches. I tend to make them like bigger, but
I make mine long. Like I make them long enough, but I will typically only do like an inch or maybe 2 inches. I do kind of skimp it a little.
But keep in mind, her and I are also very familiar with our style of knitting and also often the yarn we're using. So like say if I'm using Holst yarn, which is something I knit with all the time, I'm really like, I know how that yarn works really well. And I've knit so many things out of it before. I might not do as big of a gauge swatch. So, but in general, do a gauge swatch because it will save your butt later.
Yep.
And like we mentioned before too, try to not deviate from the pattern. Don't just assume directions. If something's not in the pattern, don't do it. Likewise, if something doesn't make sense in the pattern, make a note about it, send it to the rest of the testing group, send it to the designer. Those are things that they want to know because that's why you're testing it. I remember doing this one test knit and it had this, like, it looked like a cable, but it was actually a lace motif that you did that caused, like, it manipulated the fabric in a way that made it look like a cable with like little lace details on the side. And when it had been written out, it was supposed to go all the way down the collar band. And when it was written out, it was the same chart for both sides. And it needed to be mirrored. And that was something that I caught right away, as I was like, wait. You mean you want the thingy to like do the same thing on both sides? And I was like, I think you want it to mirror it.
That's actually, when we were testing this pattern, the chart for this part, because you can see the chart for this part here was different from the chart for this part here, but they were the same chart in the thing. Like it was done backwards. So I didn't catch it because I wasn't knitting off of the chart. I was knitting off of the written instructions, but definitely good that somebody checked, because if you were just blindly operating under the, the one assumption, you might not have seen that.
Yeah, totally.
And then you would have had your, cables going backwards. So
yeah,
worth knowing.
Totally. And that kind of thing happens all the time. That's like a big thing, especially with anything that can be charted and written out. Often one of them will be correct because that's whatever one the designers may be more comfortable working in that medium, and then charted it might be incorrect or vice versa. So that's why it's good to check. That's why we have testers. So
exactly.
I'm trying to think. So yeah, I think those are just basically to summarize the things you want to keep in mind for, like Sarah's already emphasized, is you really want to know what is expected of you as the tester. Deadlines are usually probably the biggest obstacle for most people, because sometimes designers are working on a pretty tight deadline, and so you might only have a week or 2 weeks to do something. I've done a test knit where I had 72 hours to churn out the thing. So thank goodness it was a smaller project, but sometimes that's the reality of it, and that's the kind of thing that they're working under. So maybe don't pick that as your first test knit to sign up for.
No. Unless you are confident, if you're like a really experienced knitter, maybe you'll be okay. Who knows?
Exactly. Sometimes too, if you're like, oh, I don't know how do I get picked kind of thing, having a Ravelry making sure that your Ravelry pages are up to date with your projects and stuff. Some designers, especially ones who are looking for a particular kind of knitter, or maybe you're just new to test knitting, you haven't done one before, which is fine. They just want to verify that you can actually knit, that you're not just like, ooh, I want to make a sweater, but I've never done this before. So making sure that you have your project pages up to date on Ravelry. If you have an Instagram thread, that can be helpful too. You don't necessarily, I know some people who have made Instagram feeds that are just for their knitting. And so they use that as kind of like a portfolio in a way, or a resume to refer people to. And then plus it gives you a chance to kind of like when you're working on a test knit and it gets published, you'll get tagged. And so if you're looking to grow your social media family, that can be a way to do it as well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, that's another thing to keep in mind, is that you have to be comfortable taking photos. Not all designers necessarily need you to model the photos, but if they say they want you to, you need to keep that in mind. And one thing, if you're trying to get into test knitting, is you want to have good photos either on your Ravelry or on your Instagram feed of the things that you've knit, so that they know that you're not going to take a photo in the dark.
Your dog sitting on it by the fireplace.
Yeah. You want to have like nice photos where you can actually see your test, right? So I would say at least show them that you know how to take a picture.
Yeah, that's really good advice, I would say, for sure. And that might mean getting a friend to help you. I know that's hard to do right now with COVID. If you have someone who has a really good telephoto lens, get them out there, and you can do like outdoor park modeling.
I actually have photos that a friend of mine took from at least a meter away, or like 6 feet away. We were both wearing masks the whole time, so it was really cute. It was a lot of fun, right? As long as you're comfortable with those things. But I do have somebody that lives with me, so he can take the photos. It took me a while to teach him how to take photos of finished objects.
Yeah, totally. I'm working on that with my husband as well, and he's just like, yesterday I was trying to get a picture of me in my dress so I could send it to you guys, and there was about 12 fails before we got the one that I'll have thrown in here earlier.
Yeah,
and even then it was kind of like, okay. But
yeah, I was trying to get the same thing, a photo of my dress, and Tyler took photos from here of me.
And you're like, oh.
You know, from above, so I look really short and you can't really see the dress. And my mom, because my mom basically lives with us, she came by and I was like, Mom, you're shorter than me. Can you take some photos? And then I got the perfect angle.
Exactly, right?
It's all about finding the right angle for those photos.
Exactly. I feel like once COVID is not as much of a thing, or when we can go and hang out, that like a bunch of us knitters should all like grab our most loved knitwear and go to a really nice park somewhere. And, you know, I have a really good camera, and if somebody else has a good camera, we could go and just do like gorgeous photos of us in our knitwear.
Modeling all of our knitwear. I would
exactly. Maybe that could be like a side hustle. Knitwear photos.
Totally,
you know,
right?
People do boudoir shoots. Why couldn't I do knitwear shoots?
I mean, if you're in the park, you might want to make sure you're wearing more than just your sweater, but hey.
Come on, sweater and a thong, right?
Yeah, that's a thing, right?
Oh, man.
Or knitwear?
Exactly.
I don't, no thanks.
I can't even do a thong because to me it's just butt floss. And on that lovely note, so you all should check out Sarah. She is lovely. She's a fantastic knitter. I feel very lucky to have met her this quarantine.
No, I'm so glad we bonded over gifts and have been friends since.
Me too, me too. And I can't wait until we can like go and hang out outside of our homes again. So yes. We had fun in the summer. We got to go and hang out in the park and knit in the park, which was lovely.
Yeah, it'll be nice when life gets to be a teensy bit more normal.
Teensy bit more normal. We're getting there, I think, maybe. I mean, there's vaccines in our province now, so
yeah, we'll
step in the right direction. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And thank you very much, Sarah, for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.